by talking about my past and what has brought me to this place where I'm really excited to launch sort of a new phase of work. And it's been a long time coming, and I thought the best way to talk about it would be to draw a timeline of my journey. So let's go back to the year 2002 when I was working on an organic farm in Oregon. So in 2002, I was working on the organic farm. And then one day in 2003, I was out in the field hoeing in the hot sun with a guy named Juan. Now, Juan only had an 8th grade education, and he was from Mexico, and he told me that, if he had the education that I have, which was a college degree, he would not be out here hoeing in the hot sun. So I ran inside, and I called up Portland State University. And I told them that I wanted to do what I'd always wanted to do in the past, which was to become a French teacher. So I got a job at Portland State as a teaching assistant and getting a master's in French, teaching French 101. But the problem is that we were using the textbook, and we were supposed to be speaking all in French. It was like this immersion program. So I had all these questions about how to make French work. And then I went into the GTEP program, which is like the education program, in 2004. And one day my methods professor did this presentation on comprehensible input. She brought in her bike and she talked about it in French. And I was sitting there watching her, and all these light bulbs were going off in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, this is how you're supposed to teach French. You're supposed to just talk about something interesting. So then I ran to the library and started reading a whole bunch of Krashen and James Asher about TPR and the natural approach and all kinds of ways to teach. So then from TPR, I learned about TPRS. And I went to a training, I think in about 2005, maybe 2006, with the wonderful Donna Tatum-Johns. And as I was sitting there in her presentation, I just fell in love with the method, and I thought to myself, I want to do this, I want to teach this way, and one day I want to train people how to do it. So one thing Donna told us to do was to join the More TPRS listserv. Now you got to remember, this was 2005, so listservs were the hottest thing going. So on that listserv, I heard all kinds of people talking all the time, like Lori Clark, Ben Slavic, and Susie Gross, and they were my heroes. I would just listen to them or read them talking and think about how smart they were and how they had all these great ideas, and they were so much farther down the path from me. But I was kind of scared, I was super intimidated. I was just lurking and just reading and soaking up from them. So then I got to student teaching, and I was supposed to be teaching out of the textbook, the Passé Composé. And so I knew all about TPRS and TPR, and so I tried really hard to use stories to teach about the Passé Composé. I remember telling the story about my sister seeing Elvis, which I totally made up. I wasn't really co-creating much with the students, but they loved it so much that I remember getting all these cards on my last day of student teaching, we love you, don't leave. And I was like, sorry kids, I'm like Mary Poppins, I'm on the breeze, I'm on my little umbrella, and I have to leave. Then I got my first job teaching in Gresham in the year 2006. And at first, I wasn't really teaching French at all. I was teaching English, language, arts, and social studies. And I really just wanted to be a French teacher so bad. I was so upset back in those days. I was like, why do I have to teach language, arts, and social studies? I want to be a French teacher. I love teaching languages. I love TPRS. So that went on for a while, and I continued teaching language arts and social studies until one day I went and begged my principal. His name was Randy Bryant, and I said, please, Randy, will you let me teach French? I'll teach it during the elective time instead of my reading class. So he said yes, and I became a French teacher, finally. So I was teaching French in middle school, and I was loving it. I was using TPRS and loving that, and I was also teaching language arts, social studies, and reading class, and everything was going swimmingly until the big crash in 2009. So then by the time we did our budget for the next year in 2010, unfortunately, they had to cut out my French class and have me teach some core classes during that elective time because we were short-staffed. So I taught English language arts at first because the math teacher had been put into teaching English language arts and social studies, and I was like, no, dude, I'll teach English language arts. It's harder. Give her social studies. Later on, I started just teaching social studies. And so all during that time, I wasn't teaching French, and I was sad. But the thing is that I was actually learning a bunch of things that I'm happy that I learned, so it all worked out quite well. So by the time the economy improved in 2013, I pretty much decided that I wanted to start learning Spanish because I was like, look, I really want to get back to teaching languages, and I love middle school, so I really need French and Spanish for middle school. So I went and enrolled in this language learning class in the community at this place called Tierra. But the problem with Tierra is they were like totally using the grammar method. Like they were having me learn like how to conjugate the verb ser, and I was just like, this is way too slow. This is not how I teach my students, and it's not how I want to learn. So then eventually I dropped out of Tierra. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to teach myself with some comprehensible input. I went and got a whole bunch of TPRS novels, and I started watching Destinos. I actually ended up watching Destinos 3 times. So if you have any questions about the height of Raquel Rodriguez's shoulder pads, you should definitely ask me. So I also would read the transcripts. Like I would write down what I thought they were saying, and I would check it against the transcripts. And I found out, I was like, oh yeah, dude, like Italian. I had minored in Italian in undergrad, and I was like, whoa, Italian and Spanish are really similar. For instance, they both have 2 verbs that mean to be, except I'm not sure if that one's correct in Italian. So now we're getting to the part of the story that is about Tina as a world language teacher. So I want to take you back to the year like 2008 when I used to be really avidly reading Ben Slavic's work. I would read his books, I would read his videos, I was like always reading his blog, which later on he shut down and opened up as a private PLC. So I just loved what he was doing, and I was really excited about his vision for language teaching. So back to the year 2013, I found this online tutoring company called Speak Shop, which is a fair trade tutoring company, and I worked with a woman named Rebecca in Guatemala and really helped me with my Spanish. I basically just got her to like talk to me all the time about her life and stuff that was going on with her. And then in 2015, I passed the Arella and became a Spanish teacher from all that comprehensible input. So if you think comprehensible input doesn't work, well, my Spanish isn't perfect, but it definitely helped me acquire enough Spanish to pass that test. So then I dropped my FTE down to 0.87 so that I could go up to the high school and student teach in Spanish. And I added Spanish to my license at the very end of the school year in 2014-15. So I left my old district of Gresham and I went to Portland Public Schools to teach middle school French and Spanish. Now, this was literally my dream job. I was so happy. In fact, like way back in the old days when I was student teaching, I had actually met the woman who had the job before me. And when I met her, she was an older lady and she liked to knit. And I remember her telling us that she taught middle school French and Spanish. This was like at a language teacher's job-alike meeting while I was student teaching. And I thought to myself back then, wow, that sounds like a really great job. I would love to get that job. When this woman retires, I'm going to apply for her job and see if I got it. And then I got it. So because I was now a full-time language teacher, I was a lot more active online. Like I would get on Ben's PLC, whereas before I had been shy about contributing, and I started sharing my ideas and getting ideas from other people and asking them questions. So also during this time, Ben kept talking about how he was going to retire, and he was talking about how he wanted to do workshops. And I told him, hey, Ben, like back in the old days of 2011, I started this company called Literacy Education Services. And I started it to bring in trainers and to do trainings on my own in reading and writing workshop. I had been to the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project I actually went there quite a bit. So I'd been there in 2007 and around 2010, I think, and then again in 2013 I went. And I just loved their trainings and all the resources that they had. So I had started this company to give workshops to teachers in like the Portland area about reading workshop and writing workshop, like mostly language arts and social studies teachers. So anyway, there I was on Ben's PLC and I was talking to him about like helping him set up some workshops using my company. And I was also talking about like, of course, teaching. So then in 2016, like around about January, Ben posted this video of himself teaching in India. And he was holding this picture that a student had made of a Pringle called Pringle Man. And I remember thinking, like, wow, Ben sure looks happy. Now, I'd been watching his videos for a really long time, and he always looked relatively happy, but he looked so happy doing this story based on a kid's picture. I was like, dude, I want to try that. So then I did. I found a picture that a student in my class had drawn of a cat, and I set up a camera, and I recorded myself, and I posted it to the PLC. Now, that video is not something that I'm super happy to like share with people at this point, and I don't even know where it is. But I did know that I really, really loved telling stories using kids' artwork. It like was a really fun day in class. It got a little crazy because kids were like really, really, really engaged, but it was definitely more engagement than I was seeing with the other way that I had been teaching before. So then in like February of 2016, Ben decided that he was going to write everything down about how to tell stories with these pictures in a book. So he was in India and he was like working on the book, and then he got kind of stressed out by the book, and so like I had been doing all these experimentation in my class too, and so I was like, I'll help you write the book. So I was in the States, he was in India, and we were like collaborating on this book. We called it TPRS the Easy Way, and the reason that we did that was because we had found it was so much easier for us to make engaging stories using this way of teaching, and plus we were giving an homage to our hero Steve Krashen, who wrote the book Foreign Language Education the Easy Way. So then that summer, we both went to IFLT and Agen, and Ben was doing all these presentations. And he was talking about some of this new stuff that he had developed and we had put in the book. And we met a woman named Katrine. Now, Katrine is a German woman, and she lives in Germany, and she teaches there. She teaches German at an international school, and she's also a graphic artist. So she came up with a really genius idea to draw a one-word image and have like a class artist. So this was such a great idea that we were like, oh my gosh, this like solves so many problems in getting these stories off the ground. We don't have to like wait around for a piece of artwork to like emerge from the kids just like spontaneously. We can actually do what Katrine said and elicit the artwork through the one-word image process. So at this point, Teachers Discovery told us that they wanted to produce or distribute this book, and they had already distributed Ben's big book of CI. So we started working on fixing the book up to distribute with Teachers Discovery. That summer in 2016, I was also going around with Ben helping him to set up these workshops through my company. And we went down to Mike Pito's classroom in California for Ben to do a workshop. So Mike and I got started talking about like the old days on Ben's PLC, and when Ben used to be doing this work called The Realm, which was where he would like make up this medieval realm with his students, and like each student had a job, and it was like this story that just kept going and going. It was kind of like a medieval soap opera that he was doing, and Mike and I really bonded over that because I had never met anybody besides me who like fondly remembered The Realm. So then at some point during the workshop, Mike was like, hey, I know you guys wrote this new book together, so like I want to see some of this new stuff. And then Ben started doing some of this new work in front of Mike, and the whole workshop was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So then I kind of knew like, wow, we're sort of on to something. And then Teachers Discovery came out with our book, and they called it A Natural Approach to Stories instead of TPRS the Easy Way. We had kind of decided like, we don't want to really call it TPRS the Easy Way because I'm not really sure if what we're doing is still TPRS. So then that book started getting distributed by Teachers Discovery in February of 2017. And I was so happy because I was like, wow, my name's on a book and it's getting distributed in a catalog. So then something weird happened to me in the spring of 2017. Like I started getting up really early in the middle of the night at like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, full of like crazy ideas. And I would like run to my computer and just type and type and type. And I was typing like 8 to 12 pages every single night. And I was just like pouring out all these different ideas. It was so strange. Once I got all this stuff like kind of out of me and I looked at how much I'd written, I was like, dang, I wrote like 88 pages. But then when I started cutting it down to like a usable amount, Ben helped me with this. It ended up being more like 18 pages because I'd just been like writing the same things over and over and over again. It was like I was trying to process all of this really like intense thinking on like my whole entire career and like my language arts stuff and my social studies stuff and like all the things that have brought me to this point, including like all the training and comprehensible input and the TPRS and then like working with Ben on this new stuff. It was this time period where like it was great. It was like the best of times and the worst of times. Like I felt so intrigued by all these ideas, but they were kind of like torturing me. I was like getting up so early and like they were just getting me out of bed and like making me write until my fingers bled. So then in the summer of 2017, Ben and I planned a whole lot of work. We did like 15 workshops in like 15 different cities that summer, and it was a kaleidoscope of people. Like so many different ideas came from all of these questions and things that people were asking us about this new work. So unlike the previous summer, we were really focused on just this new stuff that we'd been putting together, and yet there were still so many questions that people had, and I didn't really feel like it had been explained well enough. And all those things that I had been like grappling with in the middle of the night were still kind of unanswered. So as we were doing all these trainings, like those 88 pages were still kind of like bouncing around inside my head. And then we got to fall. And in the fall, I finally was able to sit back down and start working some more on this book, the book that ended up becoming A Natural Approach to the Year. And like all the questions that people had had during the summer were still like in my head, as well as like the 88 pages of what I had been working on in the spring. And so all of their questions started like getting into the book too. So I was like writing the book to like answer all these questions that people had asked over the summer. So it's like we'd written this book, A Natural Approach to Stories, to describe this work that we were doing, but there were still so many questions. And I knew that more needed to be written. And something else had happened over the summer too. I had done this one workshop in Ohio for Cynthia, who had asked me to come out and talk about how to start the year. And the way I had organized the workshop was basically the way I organized my school year. So I had developed these cycles of instruction and assessment, 5 weeks of instruction that led to 1 week of assessment. And the week of assessment I had started to conceptualize as a week of portfolio assessment. Because back on Ben's blog, a woman named Claire Walter, who taught ESOL as well as French, had asked, why don't you guys in world language use portfolio assessment? Now, I'd used portfolio assessment in English language arts and social studies, so I was like, dude, Claire, I don't know. I think I'll try that. And I had tried it, and it had worked. It had solved a lot of problems that I was having with my administration. So all that stuff from the cycles of instruction and assessment training like ended up making it into the book as well. And it was like this organizing principle for the book, which ended up being called A Natural Approach to the Year by Ben and me, was going to be called Year 1 by Teachers Discovery. So Teachers Discovery told us that they wanted to go ahead and start distributing this book as well. And they gave me this deadline, or us this deadline, of January 31st, 2018. So this was right around Veterans Day, and so I was like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, this book is just like forming in my head. I'm going to have to like throw it together and get it ready by January 31st. Oh no. So this is when like the Ben Slavic Tina Harganen bi-state Oregon and Colorado like writing and phone talking-a-thon like really got started in earnest. So we wrote and wrote and wrote, and if I thought my fingers were bleeding before, they really started bleeding now. But finally, we got that book published out, and it was called Year 1, and it made it into the summer catalog because we had met that deadline. So sort of part of the story that I forgot to tell is the story of CI Liftoff, without whom that book never would have really gotten written. So I started CI Liftoff back in September of 2016, and I had started it because I wanted a place where I could talk to people about this work that Ben and I were doing. So I originally just started it with 70 people, and I had met these 70 people on the IFLT page, which at that time was like the place to go on the internet to talk about comprehensible input. So these 70 people, I knew that they were interested in what I was doing back in those days because I had mentioned on the IFLT page that I had made this non-targeted lesson plan. And I had made this lesson plan based on what somebody had written on the More TPRS listserv, because she said that she wanted to try CI, but she was required to have a lesson plan out on her desk every single day in case her administrator walked in. And I thought to myself, like, wow, how could you possibly do that and have a non-targeted approach? Back in those days, I kind of thought like a non-targeted approach meant that like you didn't really have like any targets like at all, like that you would maybe not have very clear objectives. And I didn't really care that much about that back then. But I had written this lesson plan to like make it look like you had objectives and then you could just talk about whatever. So anyway, from that first 70 people, like now there's like over 5,000 people on the page, and it's just been like really crazy to have this big group grow from those first 70 people. And so they're all talking about the book and they're all asking questions and getting ideas. And so all of their ideas were making it into the book too, as well as all these ideas from the summer. So it became this like big think tank sort of all these teachers' ideas and like all the things that they were wondering about. And I was trying so hard, and so was Ben, to like answer their questions and give them a system that would work for them. So even though the book hadn't really come out in hard copy from Teachers Discovery, it had been available as a download, and people on the CI Liftoff group were starting to report like, I love year one, I think it's great, it's like giving me a really clear pathway and I really like it. So I was really happy. I thought we were onto something. So then in the summer of 2018, I thought I would plan this new type of training called Summer Institutes. And I really, just to be quite honest, modeled them off of the institutes that I had been to in New York for reading and writing workshop. They were such powerful trainings that I was like, I want to replicate this for my world language colleagues. It was also during the summer of 2018 that finally the book Year One came out in Teachers Discovery's catalog. So we were getting lots more feedback and lots more people were reading it. So something else that I was really excited about in those Summer Institutes last summer was that all of the questions that had come up in the summer of 2017, so the previous summer in all those workshops about upper levels, I had developed these Kelp Institutes. So we had the BIX Institutes and the Kelp Institutes, and the Kelp Institutes were for like upper level classes that wanted to do more academic or content-based instruction. Because once again, it was like a think tank. Like every single place I went, people would always be asking the same questions, like about assessment, about like structuring the year. And even though I'd answered those in year one, I didn't feel like I'd actually addressed the upper levels, because people kept asking that question too. Like, what do you do after year one, after like the second year? How do we address these upper levels, and especially AP and IB? And people were always asking questions like, can CI work in AP and IB? And as a language arts and social studies teacher, I was like, yes, of course. Like CI works for every single level. It's really the only answer to all the questions. So I kind of looked at year one and I was like, oh no, like my life's work that I like poured in there, and Ben's life's work that he kind of poured in there, it's not enough. It's not going to answer this question about Kelp. So then I went back to school in the fall of 2018 and I realized like, okay, I need to write something about Kelp. I'd already started a little bit because I'd already written the resource manual and I knew that this book was needed. So I took the Kelp resource manual from Summer Institutes and I started to use that as a jumping off place for this book that I'm working on right now called Beyond Year One. And in Beyond Year One, what I'm hoping to do is to show teachers a way to plan units pretty much flexibly with their class instead of having to like pre-plan the entire unit, to have these skills and strategies that they can deploy with any topic that they want to do with their class. So it's not going to have lesson plans for like your unit on clothing or your unit on the Industrial Revolution, but it's going to tell like a replicable template for a unit that would take students from input and learning about the topic to output and writing and speaking about the topic in a way that doesn't require us to pre-plan every single thing and is going to allow us to like respond to what parts of the topic emerge as interesting to the students based on the first few lessons. So I'm super excited about it, except for, man, writing a book can sure take a lot out of you. So then that brings us to now, winter of 2019. So I'm like working on this Beyond Year One book, and then finally I decided, you know what, I'm not going to get my things done that I want to accomplish unless I assemble a team. So I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 awesome people. These people were either like super familiar with the reading and writing project, like Adrian and Mary Beth and Lydia, or they were just super familiar with standards like Gina and Cameron, or they just know a ton about like instructional design. And then Fernanda Torres is helping us with like the logistics of assembling all of these writing samples that we're collecting. So we have this writing sample collection drive going on because what we're going to try to do is look at all of those writing samples and pull out some commonalities that students tend to do in a CI classroom when they're writing to a prompt. Originally, we weren't thinking about having the students write to a prompt, but then we had an ACTFL training out here in January of 2019, and Fernanda was here, Cameron was here, Mary Beth was here, Adrian was here, and Lydia was here. So we all came out together, and we didn't have Gina on the team at that point, but we all came out here together and learned from this ACTFL trainer more about the ACTFL levels. So what we're working on is taking what kids do in CI, because that doesn't always match up with the ACTFL levels. And we're gonna work on making some tools and products that will help teachers in a CI environment better assess their student writers. And we're also going to be working on some tools for instruction too. So I'm really excited about all these materials that we're making. And right now we're really taking that seed that got planted back in the summer of 2017 with the cycles of instruction and assessment. And honestly, for me, the seed was planted like way before that when I first started getting involved with the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. And we're taking the seed of those ideas, and we're gonna make new tools for teachers to use to have stronger instruction and assessment in what you would probably call a literacy-focused whole language or communicative language classroom. So the thing is that without all the people on CI Liftoff, like giving me all these ideas and giving me all this feedback, none of this would ever be happening. Liftoff is like this think tank of really creative, cool, awesome people who like really seem to just be so excited about like innovating and coming up with solutions to things that have been plaguing the CI community for so long. Maybe it's because I started with those 70 original people who were interested in something weird and new. I don't know why, but I just love CI Liftoff because it's always had this like spirit to me of being like this think tank or like this really innovative group of people that I feel like I can go to and like bounce ideas off of and find people to collaborate with to bring tools that I've just wanted to see in the world for so long. So now we're all caught up with the present and thinking ahead to the future of fall of 2019. I'm really excited because we're going to be piloting some new materials. So right now the team is working on making some new assessment tools and also 2 different units for the first year of instruction. And I'm still working on Beyond Year 1. So I'm like looking at Beyond Year 1 and thinking, oh my goodness, when am I ever going to get this finished? But good for me, I've got this dream team. Like I love this team. They're like superstars. They're awesome. I just saw a couple of them in Colorado. I love you all. You are like my salvation. You're going to help me bring all these things to life. And then I just made this video with Amy and she just joined me out here in Portland. So she's going to help out too. So you guys, I'm so excited about all this new stuff that's happening, and I just want to say thank you for being there, and especially if you are one of these 7 people that's working with me on this team, then thank you so much for helping me like maintain my sanity. It literally sometimes like depresses me when I hear people asking questions that show me that what we're developing is so needed and it's just not out there yet. So when people are asking questions about assessment or like how to plan their year, I'm just like, we cannot do this work fast enough. Like I cannot wait to see people piloting these materials and using them in the classroom with students. And I cannot wait to see them on a bookshelf in somebody's classroom like real soon. So just thank you guys for like always being there and like supporting me, because I have so many ideas in my head all the time. Like, you probably don't want to live up in there. I swear. Like, it gets kind of crazy. And I get a little overwhelmed with the amount of things that that I want to bring out into the world. So if it weren't for you guys on this Facebook page and the team of people that are working with me, like supporting me to do this, I would have probably lost it like even more than I already have, like years ago. So it's almost Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you guys.